Okay, so polynomials review. A lot of this, I can't go over every step of what to do, so a lot of it is just things that you need to know how to do. You write your review however you want, okay? I'll talk about it. You put down in your words the best way that you can remember how to do it in the shortest amount of words. So first, be able to tell whether it's a polynomial or not and what degree. Okay. Remember, to tell whether it's a polynomial, you're looking at the exponents. They all have to be non-negative integers. All right. Next, if you know a zero of a polynomial, what else do you know? Well, if it's a zero, it's also a solution. You should be able to find the factor of it. And it is an x-intercept as well. All those things have something in common. Find the zeros by factoring. Okay, be able to factor a polynomial. There's many ways. Factor out the GCF, factor the quadratic. You could factor by grouping. A lot of different ways to find the zeros by factoring. Know what multiplicities look like from the function, meaning from the equation, when it's in factored form. So that's going to be when they're exponents. You have a factor that's x plus 3 and it's raised to the fourth. That would mean it has a multiplicity of 4. But also from a graph. You need to know the multiplicity of 2 from a graph and multiplicity of 3 from a graph. Okay? The end behavior. You're always going to have as x approaches negative infinity and then as x approaches positive infinity. You need to tell me what the y is doing in each of those scenarios. Okay? You're looking at the leading term. And whether the exponent is odd or even. And the leading coefficient, whether it's positive or negative. And that should be able to tell you, you should be able to know from those things what the end behavior of the polynomial is. If you need to pause it here to write anything else. Okay, so when you're writing a polynomial, when you're given the zeros, you first write it in factored form, x minus each zero. Even if the zero is a binomial, you do x minus that binomial. Okay? And then you would multiply them out. Be able to sketch the graph by finding the end behavior, the y-intercept, and the x-intercepts, or the zeros. Now you should also know the multiplicities and know what the graph does with those multiplicities, like I said earlier. You need to know long division and synthetic division. You need to be able to factor when you're given a zero or given the factors of a factor of a polynomial. You need to be able to finish factoring it or find all the zeros for that. The remainder theorem is if you're looking for P of -8, you use synthetic division and you would not change the sign. You would use -8 in that spot in the synthetic division because that is the x value. You're not given the factor. If you're given the factor or if you're dividing by linear, that's when you would change the sign. Not when you're given the zero or if you're given the x value. And the answer is the remainder. Hence it's in the theorem, remainder theorem. That's a hint. You need to know how to find the possible rational zeros, the P over Q's, the factor, it's any possible combination of any factor of the constant over the factor of the leading coefficient. So you need to list them all out. And remember, they're all plus or minus. Okay? Descartes' rule of signs, you count the sign changes. For both p of x and p of negative x. Remember, with p of negative x, all it's changing is the signs of the terms with the odd exponents. When you're given complex zeros, you need to be able to factor it completely. So you would write the factor using the complex zeros. And you would multiply those out to get a larger factor, like a quadratic factor, and then you would divide into it to factor it completely. You need to know factor by grouping. Know that it has to be 4 terms. And to factor completely or find all the zeros, you would need to list your P over Q. If you can't just factor a quadratic, or if you can't factor anything out, or you can't do factor by grouping, you list all your possible rational zeros and then test each one until you can get it to possibly a cubic that could be factored by grouping, or you get a quadratic, and you could factor that. You could find the zeros by square roots. If it's something like x squared plus 5 or x squared plus 9, or you could have to use the quadratic formula to get the zeros. And once you have the zeros, then you should be able to write it in factored form by doing x minus each zero. Okay, that's pretty much it. I hope it was able to fit on there and you did what you need to do to remind yourself later on how to do these. So write it in your own words, and good luck. All right, you want a joke? I'll give you a joke. What's Moby Dick's favorite dinner? Fish and chips. Get it? Fish and chips.